Very pleased now to be joined by one of the OGs. That's right. We've gone all the way back into the history books to pull this man out of retirement to podcast once again for us here at Blogging the Boys. If you're watching us on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel, you see him. If you're listening to the Blogging the Boys podcast network, you heard him yesterday on Wednesday's episode of Talkin The Draft with Connor Livesey. It is the one and only Joey Ickes, who I can't wait to break bread with someday at Monument Inn. Joseph, how goes it?
That's quite the pull there on the Monument Inn, and you're absolutely right. And first of all, you're making me feel very old by referring to the history books. You know, it has been, I was telling Connor last week, I think it's been 11 years since I wrote my first front page article on Blogging the Boys, which is a number that I don't know that I can fathom, considering, I don't feel old enough to have done anything 11 years ago, much less, been a grown adult writing, football articles for that long. But yeah, it's awesome to be here. It's cool to be, a part of the Blogging the Boys platform that's been such a big part of my life.
I don't know what happened. Have we lost each other? We're just going to leave this in. I've lost Joey for a second and his internet connection. I think Joey's back now. Joey.
Oh, yes.
Okay, you're back.
I'm here, yes.
Yeah, you were saying it had been like 100 years and then your internet died, which is just kind of like perfect and a perfect metaphor for the situation.
Yeah, I'm old enough to have bad internet, so it comes in and out. No, it's hopefully we'll hang tight for a little bit here, but yeah.
We do have a lot of younger listeners and viewers just because that's kind of the way like the world works now. So I feel old when I talk to you because I got in this game in 2015 and at the time it was like, holy crap, Joey Ickes is like a god. He's a legend at this. And it is just wild, like, to think it's been 8 years since then. I remember when you wrote your book, when you wrote Nuts and Bolts, like I remember all of like those days feel like yesterday. I can't believe how much time has passed.
Yeah, it's I remember the desk I sat at when I put all that together and all that kind of stuff. And it was it does feel way closer than you look back, and it was 8 years ago going into the 2015 season, I believe.
I remember when you ate paper.
Yes, when I ate the tweet. Yes, it's
what was the tweet you ate?
I don't remember. It was some prediction that I made preseason or something like that. And I said that if I was wrong, I would eat the tweet. And sure enough, the end of the season or whatever point threshold came, and I told people to remind me and that I would eat the tweet if I was wrong, and I did, and that was an experience for sure.
That's awesome. Well, everyone listening or watching, you can listen to Joey and Connor on Wednesdays on the Blogging the Boys podcast network on Talkin The Draft. They're obviously getting ready for the NFL draft. I tried to twist Joey's arm and get him to write again, but he's a very busy man. And like, how many hats do you wear? You're wearing a backwards one right now. Like, talk about
I pretty much always do because we talked about me getting old, right? There's a little bit of evidence showing of the age on the top of the back of my head now. So
I thought it was a metaphor for like a young Romo, like when he would wear that backwards hat and get all sorts of criticism for it. So like, I didn't know what this was going to be.
That's much more flattering than the real reason why I wear it, for sure. But yeah, no, I've got my full-time job that I have, my as my friends and other folks around me call it, my big boy job. And then I write about Texas A&M football at aggieswire.usatoday.com. I spent some time with the Locked On Podcast Network covering the Aggies for them. I stepped away from that because of time, really. It's the main thing. And then I also I'm a 50% partner in a bit of physical services business here locally, and I have, as some of my friends like to say, I have a bazillion kids. I have 4 kids, and we're building a house, and I'm doing a lot. It's very, very busy, lots of stuff going on. But it's funny, the Cowboys have just always been a part of all of it all the way through, and it's just kind of one of the threads that kind of pulls along for a long time now.
Well, like I'm saying, you helped lay the foundation. Lots of BTB alum. Rabble Rouser does a show now here. Obviously Dave is amazing. I remember back in the V Sporto days when you in Landon actually used to do the Blogging the Boys podcast. And so we hope we've kind of kept the bones of the place intact, obviously to make it nice and sing. Landon obviously now a part of the Locked On Network with Marcus doing the Locked On Cowboy show. So it's cool to see like everybody kind of still, I was going to say living and thriving. It is kind of a wild thing to think about, though, how long ago all of those days really were. Like I said, I so vividly remember the 2015 draft. Like I remember when Lyle Collins signed with the Cowboys, like it was like this just fervor on the internet, like everybody freaking out. That was so much fun. So it's a really special time. This is, I don't know. I've kind of, in that time, Joey, I've kind of gone dark, right? Like I had my dark season, right? Like, where I was the bad guy. I was like Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man 3 with the hair over and stuff like that. And I was super jaded and super upset. I feel like I've turned a corner, but I feel like I'm alone in that. I feel like there's so many people who are still really negative about this team. And maybe I'm just like drunk on the Kool-Aid, but like, what are your, I don't have a rundown for us. Like, what are your general thoughts, questions, takeaways, concerns, whatever? We're just here talking Cowboys football for a little while. So what's on your heart? What's on your chest?
Yeah, I think the journey that you've taken is relatively similar to the journey that I've taken, and that it's almost natural to sort of when you sort of convert yourself from a fan into somebody who, writes about the team. And, some people call them fanalists, right? Where you sort of stay fans, you cover one team, you analyze the one team. And usually you go into that because you're super passionate about that team. You care a lot about it. You believe that they have what it takes to succeed, and you want to talk about it and you want to write about it. And so you start doing that. And then the more you dig into the team and the more familiar you get with it, the more you start to see the holes in the situation, the more you start to understand. And the other thing that comes with it is you start to have conversations with people that are closer to the situation. And you realize, hey, this organization, and it's not just for the Cowboys, it's any team, any organization, and really anything. This football team that I thought about as this organization that operated at the pinnacle and at the forefront of everything is really making decisions and operating just like the mom and pop hardware store down the road that's run by a dad and his sons, and maybe his daughter is involved too, maybe she's not, but it operates exactly the same way, just at a way bigger scale and with way more people heavily invested in what happens. And you start to figure that stuff out, and the way you put it is very well said. You sort of start to get a little jaded about it and feel like, man, this kind of sucks. Like, why like they have all these resources available to them. Why are they not doing more? Why are they not better? And then you sort of start to come around on the idea that you learn that it's not just your team that operates this way. It's almost every team that operates that way. And every team has, like every coach, everybody who has worked on a team at any point in their professional life understands that there are people on that team or that are in roles and in positions that they may not be, fully competent in, and that they're not necessarily the best in the world at that. It doesn't matter what size company you're at, that's going to be the case. And that's going to be the case with coaches on coaching staffs. That's going to be the case with scouts and scouting departments, and even all the way up to, like really high level executives in the front offices of these teams. Is that some of these people are the best in the world at what they do, and some of them are just flat out not competent to fulfill the roles that they're in. And once you sort of start to realize that happens across the entire league, and you start to really look at one of the things we all have access to so many numbers and data and stuff like that these days, you sort of start to realize that there's really only a few things that matter. And when you go back to it, they have that curve, and I don't remember what it's called, but that level of expertise curve, right? Where it's like you're a complete novice at something. And then once you start to learn a little bit, you feel like you know way more than you know. And then the more you get, the more you continue to learn, the more you realize you don't know. And as you spend more time doing this, you almost realize not that you don't know as much as you thought you did, but just that the stuff at the very beginning, the stuff like really the main thing that matters is, do you have a good quarterback or do you not? Do you have a competent head coach or do you not? And then can you get in the playoffs and get on a run? And really, when it comes to, hey, can we win a Super Bowl? Unless you have Pat Mahomes, because he's a different creature, that's really the only thing that matters. And this Cowboys team they have a good quarterback, they have a competent head coach, and they're fully capable of getting in the playoffs and getting their quarterback on a 4-game heater and winning the whole thing. So why would I worry about the minutia on a game-to-game basis so much of how they looked, what the style points look like, and all that kind of stuff?
Everything you said was wonderful and perfect, and I think encapsulates like the emotional journey that I'm sort of at in this like season of the television show that I'm the main character in. And so I think, and on that subject, like I sort of, like people will sometimes be like, "Oh, Joey, like what's a show you wish you could watch again for the first time?" People will be like, "Oh, like Breaking Bad, like the first season of Game of Thrones, whatever." Like I do sort of feel that way. Like I wish I could go back to a time where like I was like, I don't want to say naive, but maybe innocent. And maybe, and like I had the presumption that like they were this like world class team. Like, and I'm not like, I don't think either of us are sitting here being like they suck, they're terrible, they're trash. But like, there is some like forest through the trees like ness happening here. And it's where I've really kind of landed too. Certainly, we're recording this by the way on Tuesday. We dropped this episode on Thursday, but it's been what 10 days since the Super Bowl. And like I hate the Eagles with every fiber of my being. Like I despise them so much, but I respect the hell out of them. And like you said, like I would say maybe there are like 25, 26 teams in the NFL. They're just like, hey man, like let's cash some checks and let's chill. Yeah. Like, we make it to the Super Bowl every once in a while. Cool beans. Like we'll fly out to Arizona, Miami, whatever it is. But the Eagles are that team that's like, no, we want more. They are Adam Driver in episode 8. More. We're both Houston Astros fans. They remind me so much of that. They're like, what is our weakest link? Like, let's attack that so much and so aggressively. And so like, it's frustrating that you talk about the quarterback, that Dak Prescott seemingly like owns the Eagles. And it's like, man, you have the guy, like, like you have the one thing that can own the team who's doing everything they can in their power to do this. Like, why can't you match that energy? Why can't you match that level of intensity? Because imagine if you tried, right? Like every person who's been like a smart aleck in their life, at some point, like a parent or a guardian or somebody's been like, I'm not saying this was you, Joey. You're a fine.
Oh, it was. I know where you're going, and it was 100% me. I was having this conversation with my wife yesterday, so yes.
So Joey, if you just tried, man, if you just did this, you could again. Joey's a highly educated man, Texas A&M University. Like nobody come for that, but like everyone's kind of been in that like sort of boat in some aspect in their life, right? Like where it's felt like there's so much untapped potential there, and I think that turns into aggression when it comes to people attacking the front office. It's that time of year. Like I don't know that I feel badly for Stephen Jones, but I kind of do. Like I feel I'm not going to sit here and like laud him or say like the Cowboys front office is one of the best in the NFL, but everyone's like, you see the same meme over and over again, the black and white face, whatever, and the like F them stuff, whatever, blah, blah, F them free agents. I mean, like he's been, I feel like we give him no credit. I feel like he's in such a lose-lose situation. And that's where maybe I'm just optimistic. You mentioned, you have kids. Now I have a 1-year-old. Maybe I'm just soft. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what it is, but like, I mean, he was right on J-Ron Curse. They were right to not pay Odell when they did. They were wrong on Amari. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say like they have this sterling reputation, but we treat them as if they are these buffoons. Like that is, and that's some just of like how the internet can be. But I don't know. I mean, I do feel like we don't celebrate their victories enough.
Yes, I generally agree with you that like, and part of that is because, this team went to the divisional round of the NFC playoffs. They won a playoff game on the road in a like extremely convincing fashion against the greatest quarterback of all time on the road in what is it? They handed him a really tough defeat in his last game as an NFL quarterback.
Navy jerseys, grass field, throw all the stuff out. Yeah,
exactly. And then every podcast network coming off of that, every website coming off of that was this Cowboys season a success? Because the standard, because of history, is if the Cowboys don't win the Super Bowl, if the Cowboys don't make the NFC Championship game, the season's not successful. And so, and as a fan, you're like, yes, of course that's the standard, because like, what else are you trying for? If you're not trying to win a Super Bowl, what else are you trying for? And the thing is that with these ownership groups and these front offices, it's not that binary. With the coaches and staffs and the players, it really sort of is. And you hear former players talk about, you hear Jesse Holley say, like, the only standard for an NFL season is, did you win a Super Bowl or not? But in reality, the front offices can't operate that way. Otherwise, 31 NFL franchises fail and 1 succeeds. And so they have all these intermittent goals and all these other things that they're trying to achieve that don't really matter to us, but they matter a lot to them. And there's financial aspects of that. There's cash flow aspects of that. There's team building, roster construction aspects of all that. And it's really easy for us as fans. And I'm the guy who, the salary cap's not real, all that stuff. And there's enough data and the economics of it all work out that's really and truly, it's true that you really can. And there's enough teams that do it. You can do whatever you want to do financially out of the salary cap. But each team sets their own philosophy of how they want to manage the cap. And that's really where I think fans get sideways with Stephen Jones is that, and really the Jones family in general, they want to win the way they want to win. It seems like more than they just want to win. Whereas you watch the Eagles, you talk about the Eagles because they're the best example of this. They have a way that they want to win too, but that's because they have enough information and enough data that they've looked at and says this is the best way to win, not the way that we like to win. And so like they always have an offensive head coach. They all these sorts of things that they do, and they will turn over every single rock to try to make their team better in any way they can. And then you hear Stephen Jones say, personnel's a 360 talent acquisitions, a 365 day a year business. And then a lot of times they're on the yacht in the Caribbean on the first day of free agency. And you're like, is it really a 365 day a year business? If on the day when all this stuff really starts, you guys aren't even in the country. Now, some of that is perspective or perception because Will McClay's doing so much of it and all that. But it just sometimes I think, Charlotte is extremely good at branding and public relations and all that stuff. And I think that's something that Stephen Jones could use a little bit of brand coaching from his sister in terms of how to present himself in a way that causes fans to believe that he's, on the right track. Because I don't always think he does a good job.
Again, incredible sort of analysis, and I agree completely. I think I don't want to give the Eagles any more credit, but I think the thing that we don't give them enough credit for is their admission of failure on Carson Wentz. We're so lost in all the Jalen Hurts stuff and everything else, and AJ Brown and Hassan Reddick and all these other things and all these other variables. But when was the last? I guess maybe Taco was the Cowboys sort of waving the white flag that we were wrong, we messed up, we fessed up, but they even that was in his third season. They took a long time, much longer. They hung on to Tristan Hill. They hang on. They're such a sunk cost fallacy organization where the Eagles are we gave this dude a contract. That sucks. But if we keep him here, we're not as good of a football team. So let's figure out a way to be the best possible football team, and everything else is not as important. So I agree with you in that sense. I've never asked anybody this question, and it's partly true because I only thought of it right now. But I want to ask you, you said you've been doing this for 11 years. So let's wind back to I don't know, let's say 2011, the beginning of the Garrett era. In that time, what would you say is your favorite Dallas Cowboys season? What would you say was the best Dallas Cowboys season? And you can define that however you want. And what would you say was the best team in that time? So your personal favorite, the best one that they fielded, and the most successful. And it's possible to have the same answer for multiple questions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think my favorite season was probably the 2014 season because that one really felt like it came out of nowhere. Because they just come off, the 3 8-8 seasons in a row. And it's Jason Garrett's kind of coaching for his career, coaching for his job. And, all of a sudden they put together this team. They add Zach Martin to the Travis Frederick and Tyron Smith interior or offensive line, line of scrimmage really solidified offensively. And all of a sudden it all takes off. And that's also, that was peak. That was as good as we saw Tony Romo play in his entire career.
It was a lot of justification to your point.
Yes,
it was conviction of I told you that there were so many I told you Romo was great. I told you Garrett was great. I told you Zach Martin was the pick over Johnny Manziel. It was such an I told you so sort of season.
Absolutely. And it was so much fun to cover that team and to follow that team on a game to game basis just because so much about it was so fun and the defense was bad, but Rolando McClain comes in and all of a sudden he goes from being this guy who can't stay on the field because of alcohol and whatever else there was, the substance stuff and suspensions and everything, didn't really want to play. It comes in, Sean Lee gets hurt the first day of OTAs, Rolando McClain comes in and he's this revelation at linebacker, and they do just enough. Jeremy Mincey's their best pass rusher, and it just a conglomeration of Island of Misfit toys. But that offense was it was still, pretty much it was peak Dez Bryant. It was peak Tony Romo. It was pretty close to the peak of that offensive line. And it was just so much fun to watch and be a part of, even from a distance. But that was probably my favorite season, or the best. I think the best team they had was the 2016 team, because we saw what the 49ers did this year with Brock Purdy, in terms of having a team that's capable of plugging a rookie quarterback in who exceeds all expectations in the quality of his play. And Dak was phenomenal as a rookie, but he that was the year that Landon and I were doing the Blogging the Boys podcast. So I remember that year so well because Landon and I would come on and talk about how we didn't know if there had ever been a quarterback who had developed as much between his last year in college and his first year in the NFL and changed so much about his game in that period than what Dak Prescott did. And I don't think you could look at 2015 Dak Prescott at Mississippi State and anybody who tries to tell you, oh, I knew at 2015 when I watched Dak Prescott play at Mississippi State that he would turn into the quarterback he is now. He's a completely different player, and that's a huge statement to who he is. I got an alarm going off. Give me just a second.
That's okay. Joey had an alarm going off on his phone. So I'm going to buy him some time. I'm going to go ahead and say that 2014 was probably my personal favorite as well. I was buying you time, Joey, and saying that 2014 feels it was intimate. Like like 2014 felt like hours. You know what I mean? Like it was a really kind of personal season, which is why like that one, like the other playoff losses hurt, but like that one felt like it was stolen. Like that was just such a dirty way to end it. And you mentioned talked about peaks. Or primes or whatever. That was probably the peak version of Terrence Williams in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can argue kind of the peak version of Cole Beasley. He was still a fine player, but like that was we didn't realize it then, but that was the end of the road for a lot of great things.
Yeah, and they were able to extend it a little bit, and recapture a lot of that magic with some of those guys in 2016. But the peak for a lot of those guys was in 2014. And like you said, the intimacy of it, and like you knew Tony was getting a little older. We didn't know that was going to be the last time we really saw him play meaningful football, which is an insane thought to have. But we saw him like walking off the field at Lambeau, and just the emotion of that situation and the way that game ended and there's a reason we still talk about Dez caught it and all this stuff is because that one really hurt. Like that, you look back at that team and go, and the way the league played out that year. And if they get past Green Bay in that game, they probably are going to the Super Bowl. And there's a pretty good chance they win the Super Bowl that year.
I've said for years, I think they lose. I think they beat Seattle, and that was like the big thing, right? Because they were like the only team who won in Seattle that year. But like, I think they probably lose to New England. I don't think it's as tight of a game as it was for Seattle personally. But I mean, like, if they had lost the Super Bowl, they had lost Super Bowl 49, we would still be like sitting here like cashing in on that. No pun intended. We would be like, this is a great team. Like y'all quit. Like the droughts would have been over, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. Like, we'll pivot back to the conversation we were having about the front office. Is like that's what. You hear Jerry say, we like to think more long-term. And then you hear some guys say, I'd rather this team just be competitive every year, win 10, 11, 12 games every year. And if they win in the playoffs, they win in the playoffs. If not, who cares? And you think about like the Denver Broncos, right? Like they sort of go all in. They win the Super Bowl with Peyton Manning, and they've sort of been, middling up and down, not very good since then. I would trade with them. From what they won the Super Bowl in 2012?
It was the next year. It was 2015.
2015 they won the Super Bowl, yeah. And they've done nothing since then.
They've literally not made the playoffs once.
Yeah, the Cowboys have very clearly been a better franchise. I would trade all of these years since then for that Super Bowl in 2014, the way that the Broncos took the 2015 Super Bowl. And like the Rams, they went to the Super Bowl twice in 5 years. They won last year. Who knows what's coming in the future because of the age of the quarterback and all that kind of stuff. But if they never contend again with Sean McVay and Matt Stafford and that group, and they fall off the way everybody predicts that they will, who cares? They went on one of the best 5-year runs in the history of the NFL. They went to the Super Bowl with 2 different quarterbacks in a 3-year period. They won the Super Bowl. Like, who cares if they're not good for 3 or 4 years? They'll be good. The Eagles went to 2 Super Bowls in 5 or 6 years with 2 different quarterbacks, 2 different head coaches. It does not take long to go through a cycle in this league. 5 years, I say it all the time on Twitter, 5 years is football eternity. And I would trade the next 5 years not being very good for them to go to the Super Bowl one time, for sure.
Even like I don't mean to like make us pathetic, but like even like an NFC title game, like I think about the 2017 Vikings that lost to the Eagles obviously in the title game, but like I would imagine that like even we're sitting here, it's going to be 6 years later that like Vikings fans are like, that was a pretty good day. Like the Minnesota Miracle and Stephon Diggs, like that was all like a lot of fun. I mean, and like to your point, like there has been fun, like we'll call it since 2015, like the 2016 year that obviously was amazing. The more I think about it, nothing about 2017 was fun. 2017 was annoying and painful and frustrating and just very, very, very difficult. That was the Zeke suspension. That was the Adrian Claiborne game. I remember vividly when they lost to the Chargers on Thanksgiving. It was the first time in franchise history they scored single-digit points in 3 straight games. It was the Week 17 loss to the Eagles that they beat them 6-0, but then the Eagles won the Super Bowl. Like 2017 sucked, except for the Houston Astros, obviously winning the World Series. But so we've defined 2014 as kind of the most precious, like favorite season since 2012, 2011, whatever. I agree with you. 2016 was probably their best chance. Like, and you had the divisional round at home. Like that, I mean, like that in and of itself sort of like makes that the answer for that. What would you say is the most successful season then? Because like they haven't made it past that point in any other, but like your nominees, I guess, since 2011, if they're not going to be the same, are 2018, which was sparked by the Amari Cooper trade, or this most recent season. Because I think this past season is better than 2021, just in the sense that
I think
won
so
a playoff game. Right?
Yeah, I think you have to go with this year. Like they
think
went
so.
on the road.
You think this is the most successful season for the Dallas Cowboys since Jason Garrett was hired? I don't know that I disagree. I'm just confirming.
I really think so. I mean, they tied the franchise record for wins in a season, and they very clearly did virtually no game planning for Washington the last week of the season. They went in with like day one install, like these are the plays we put on the field on day one of training camp against Washington, and they didn't care to win that game, even if the starters played. Like they left the starters in thinking we got enough talent. If we win the game, great. If we don't, that it doesn't really matter. And so they won 12 out of 16 games that they really cared about. They did it without their starting quarterback for 5 games. They were within a game or so of being the number 1 seed in the NFC, and the only team that was ahead of them was the team that went to the Super Bowl that they beat they never played them starting quarterback to starting quarterback, but they put up 40 points on them in the last part of the season against their really good defense, and then they won a playoff game on the road for the first time in pretty close to our lifetimes, and they did it against Tom Brady, and then they went on the road against a really good team and played really tight and really tough with that really good team, and just couldn't get it done on the road. And that kind of stuff happens in the NFC or in the NFL. And it's really hard to look at, you can't say 2018 was more successful because, they won the playoff game at home, but, they did not. The game against LA, I think, was worse than the game against San Francisco, just because nothing about the game in LA really felt like the Cowboys really had any chance to win that game. When, they were very close. They were 1 touchdown away. They were driving down the field at the end of the half to score a touchdown, and a ball got picked and intercepted towards the end of the half that turned, basically wound up, you could say, turning that game around. And so I just think that's got to be the year. There's really, it's funny as we talk about how they've been way better since 2015 than the Broncos. There's also not that many like super high end years to say this is no question the most successful season.
I think I agree with you. And I know we started in 2011, but even if we go all the way back to the final Super Bowl season in 1995, like it's hard to pick a year. Like there's no year post 95 pre Romo that is in the mix for like most successful season. So like the only other years that we're not like sort of counting are 06, which was this like kind of like figuring out your kind of good year. 07, which that might be the best team they've had, obviously, but I don't know that it was the most successful season. And 2008 was like that was a squandered opportunity. In 2009, like whatever, they beat the Eagles back to back. Like I still don't like that. That doesn't sit like in like my mightiest memories. But this year, like to your point, I never like came up with like a term, but they were the curse destroyers or whatever. Like what was Rod Marinelli's thing? The Mighty Orphans. Is that what it was? The Mighty Orphans?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
right.
I can't remember exactly what. Yes, but
they were something like I mean, like they went 4-1 without Dak. What? Your franchise quarterback went down and you won 80% of your games. That's impossible. Like we talked about like when Nuts and Bolts was it 2015 when Nuts and Bolts came
2015,
out? Like, that was like it was literally impossible. They literally won 1 of 12 games without Tony Romo, and it took like this Herculean effort on Monday Night Football in Washington to do that. I mean, obviously 2010 was a disaster. 2020, wasn't quite a disaster, but it was obviously very ugly. And some of that was like the ramifications of the world. But like, okay, you went 4-1 without Dak. To your point, like you won in the red stripe. You won in the throwback jerseys on Thanksgiving. You beat the Eagles at home. Like you won a playoff game on the road in the Navy jerseys on a grass field. You beat Tom Brady for the first time ever. You had back-to-back seasons with playoffs. You had back-to-back seasons with 12 plus wins or whatever. Like, so like, I do think like relative to expectations somewhat, it was maybe their most successful season. And to the point we've kind of made all along, like it sort of came out of nowhere. Like they sort of didn't think it would happen. I mean, dude, they took a tackle in the first round that we all hated, that we thought was like the worst possible pick. They got literally nothing from their third round pick. I mean, like I that's where I'm saying, like, I get the inclination to be like, this team sucks, this team's terrible, typical Cowboys, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, dude, they just crawled through sludge. Like they are Andy Dufresne on the other side of this tunnel. Like we should be somewhat excited. Like they're a free man in so many senses.
Right. And it's like, you talk about it, like they picked a first round tackle we didn't really like. He wound up playing really well. The second round guy was like defensive end 5 or something like that and was still productive. The third round pick played 30 snaps on the season or something like that, and then you get through there, they get all they get is a 5th round pick for Amari Cooper that they used to pick John Ridgeway, who they then release and put on waivers and gets claimed to Washington. So they literally get nothing in exchange for Amari Cooper. And the head coach is apparently bad. The offensive coordinator is bad. Nothing on the offense is good. The quarterback sucks. And yet somehow they have a top 5 offense in the league per play in almost every metric whenever when Dak's on the field. And so something's got to be good in that scenario, right? And so it's like somebody's got to be good. And the most important guy in the scenario is the quarterback. And he's the guy who sort of carries throughout all these changes when they've been good the whole time through all these changes. So that sort of goes back to our conversation earlier about how hard we are on these organizations, is that we talk about how many mistakes this team seems to make, and yet they won 12 games, 2 games in a row. They won a playoff game this year. Like they got to be doing something right. And so you may as well just enjoy the ride, right?
And that's like, this was sort of the spirit of my episode last week, was like, it was actually almost that exact line. Like something has to be good. Like it's because people will be like, McCarthy sucks, doesn't understand time management. Kellen sucks, curls all the time, runs on first down. Dak sucks. Like who is good then? Like who is the person that is responsible for this top 5 offense? And like and Zeke sucks, Pollard, blah, blah, like can't stay healthy. Like so, there has to be something. Like it cannot, like, and that's not like a take. That's just like math. Like there has to be something that is propelling them forward. And so and it has to be offensively. Like you cannot tell me this is Dan Quinn or Micah Parsons. Like there is something to their offense. And so I mean, that's where I'm at. Like I'm at this point, where they have the 3rd best quarterback in the conference. Like that was something I talked about last week too. Like if you want to say Jalen Hurts is number 1, fine. I'm not going to like sit here and argue with you. You could argue that Dak is 2. Like I think the 3 best quarterbacks in the NFC, pending trades and whatever, are Dak Prescott in any order: Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, and Kirk Cousins. Like, so, okay, fine. Like on the worst day, you have the 3rd best quarterback in the conference. You have the 2nd best defensive player in the conference. You have a top 5 to 7 wide receiver. You have a head coach who is in favor of aggression and who's going to be calling all of your offensive plays. You have perhaps the best defensive coordinator in the NFL. I mean, like, so I understand we're pissed and it's a drought and it's frustrating and all this stuff, but it's like the skies are pretty sunny. Like, it's not doom and gloom and raining.
Yeah. When you zoom back out from it, it's a lot easier to see the good stuff than when a lot of times it feels like we sort of take the good stuff for granted because we're trying to look for the next marginal step forward that they can take. And so it's like, they have a good quarterback and a good head coach and a good this and a good that and a good that, but they don't have this, and that thing is the reason why they can't go to the next level. And maybe that might be true, but to get to that, you have to stop appreciating the fact that, in my mind, he's the best quarterback in the conference.
I'm not like in disagreement. But like,
semantics at that point.
Yeah, it's a conversation. That's all I'm saying. But exactly. I'm with you.
Exactly. You have one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the conference, regardless of what order you put them in. You just ran through all of it. You have all of that. You win 12 games 2 years in a row. In a year, you're supposed to see all this defensive regression. It doesn't happen. Now you got to maybe think about the fact that maybe it's coming for you in a doubly mean way coming forward in the next year or two. But you overcome all of those things that we've talked about in the last 35 minutes, and yet the overall dynamic of the fan base is still, this team sucks, they'll never win anything. And maybe that's true because maybe the ownership and the structure, because it's owned by the people who are making the primary personnel decisions in terms of roster management, because of that dynamic, prevents the sense of urgency that some of these other guys have in order to try to save their job. Stephen Jones is never losing his job as long as he lives. And so he has the opportunity to make decisions based on a timeline that doesn't make sense to anybody else. And maybe that does keep them from winning a bunch more Super Bowls. Maybe it keeps them from ever winning another Super Bowl as long as he's running things. But it's still a really good team right now. And I was thinking about this yesterday. Like, this was year 7 for Dak Prescott. We're going into year 8. He's got 2 years left on his contract. Who knows if he wants to re-sign here based on, the way the last contract went. You hear murmurs from people and stuff like that he's not necessarily thrilled with the lack of urgency. We've heard more players, it feels like, sort of come out over the last few weeks and sort of say, like, man, we got to do something. Like, our team, we got to go here. Like, so maybe there's that dynamic starting to build, and that'll build some urgency. But, like, we're not that far from, Tony Romo started, 10 years? 8 years. Yeah, eight years, and then he was going to start in 2015, got hurt, was going to start in 2016. That would have been, year 11, and he never started that year.
So like, I was thinking about that while I was like counting while you were talking. I was listening, but I was counting. If you count the 06 season, and I know some people don't, like, whatever, but like, the 06 season counts for me. 2012 was his 7th season. And so, like, I think about this tweet all the time. Fellow Aggie Cassidy McWash, great member of Cowboys Twitter, she tweeted out the night Andrew Luck retired. That was like still relatively like fresh off of Romo's retirement and everything. And she tweeted, it was something like, I'm paraphrasing, but it was like, make sure to hug your franchise quarterbacks tight. Like you truly never know when the end is coming. And you talked about it. Like 2014 was like the last real Romo year. Like after Romo's 7th season, there were only 2 more. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have and like, I know people like hate Dak or whatever. So like, they're probably like, good, only 2 more, blah, 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 whatever. Like, it may not be Dak. Like, maybe we've seen a lot of players like Utah, when Dez caught it, he had like 2 good seasons left for the Cowboys. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it
really was like 1.5 because he wound up hurt so much. Yeah.
It can evaporate so quickly. And that's part of what makes it hard, right? Like, that's why, like, it's hard to imagine the Eagles are getting back, right? Like, because it's so difficult. You have to rebuild over and over and over and over again. But I think that they've shown enough to trust them in this era, in the Mike McCarthy era. I know people hate him and think he's whatever, but like the data speaks for itself. Like, the success speaks for itself. Like, we'll wrap with this. I trust Mike McCarthy more than I have any non-Bill Parcells coach in the post-Super Bowl era. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's the right approach to take. And that I love that hug your franchise quarterback, because yes, like, the Cowboys went from Romo to Dak, and the Colts went from Peyton Manning to Andrew Luck. But like, look at everything the Colts have been through since then. And look at everything that the Cowboys went through between Romo and Aikman. And look at what the Broncos have been through since Peyton Manning, and what they went through between Elway and Manning. And there is a desert on the other side of this franchise quarterback that the Cowboys have. That is, if you think the last 30 years of no Super Bowl looks bad or feels bad, wait until you get to the quarterback desert again and what that desert feels like. So just appreciate what we have. Yeah.
Even the like lack of a star wide receiver desert sucks. Like before CD had kind of taken over, it was like, dude, this sucks. Like 2018 pre-Amari sucked. It is a terrible. And like you mentioned, why they lost. Like, I remember after that 2014 loss, obviously the Des Cottick game, like, all we sat, and as a younger RJ got into the world of blogging and podcasting, it was like, man, if they had just had a pass rush against Aaron Rodgers with the calf injury, it's like, man, like, Sam Williams was their 5th defensive end, Joey told me. You know what I mean? Like, now, like, you can have that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can go get the one thing that you think you need, and it's still not enough. Like, sometimes the game is just mean. Like, sometimes it doesn't work out, and like, that's frustrating and that sucks, but that doesn't mean that they're trash. They do certainly have room for improvement. I think we both agree there. We're talking on the day that ESPN connected the top 50 free agents to their ideal fits, and they have Odell Beckham Jr. connected to the Dallas Cowboys. Do you want to see that? As somebody who wants, you're doing the draft show, but as somebody who wants to see the Cowboys draft Jackson Smith and Jigba, I'm kind of against that because that would probably mean no JSN, but I'm a fan of not pigeonholing yourself when it comes to the draft. And so if you want to sign Odell and not have to take a receiver in the first round, sign me up.
Yeah, I'm on Team JSN also. I think he's phenomenal. I think the fit with him and CD would be great. But the OBJ thing is interesting to me. They have to do something at wide receiver, right? And it has to be material. The hard thing is that they have Michael Gallup locked into this, really substantial contract that, based on what we saw last year, and we know the injury situation there, it's hard to imagine him being more than like a really high-end wide receiver 3, like a really, really high-end wide receiver 3, which means you have to peg this wide receiver 2 spot, which means you can't pay too much for wide receiver 2 because you're already paying wide receiver 3 a lot of money. But you also have to get a really high-end wide receiver 2 because that's how you have to play in the league right now. You have to play with 2 really high-end pass catchers. And so it's just a really hard thread that they have to the needle that they have to thread here at this wide receiver spot.
But I'll bring up the Eagles for the last time. It's a hard thread. How are we going to get rid of Carson Wentz and transition to Jalen Hurts? You got to find a way. Like that's literally your job. Like so, you have to find a way. Whether it's Odell, whether it's JSN, whether it's whatever, you have to find a way. But I'm going to choose to live on the sunnier side of things and say that they do. You know what I mean? Like we've both had our fair share of insults that we've hurled at the team on the platform that is twitter.com. Joey has done it much longer than I have. Once again, one of the OGs around here on Twitter at Joey Ickes. You can hear him every Wednesday on Talkin The Draft on the Blog on the Boys podcast network. Joey, closing thoughts, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's great to be, back as part of the Blogging the Boys platform. It's awesome to get the chance to do this with you. And I'm just excited for this journey we're taking for the next couple months.
Okay. Dave keeps hounding me to get Joey to ride again. So just when I press you again, just know that's coming from Dave Hopper, not from me. Thanks a lot, Joey. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see y'all next time.
All right, thanks.